Bipolar disorder, as its name suggests, is a psychiatric condition which is characterized by two poles of a mood or of a psychological state. So we talked a little bit about major depression in a previous video, and in bipolar disorder, what happens is that there is a period of depression, but it's identified by its periods of elevation, right? So there is a depressed mood, and then there is on the other hand, of the pole, there is the elevation of the mood. So in bipolar, we are generally focusing on the elevation of the mood and also the resulting depression. Okay, so having understood that, there are three terms that you have to understand to completely conceptualize bipolar disorder. So the first term is mania. Now, mania is basically a general, it's not a very, well, it's a general elevation of mood, and it reflects throughout one's life, right, in various different activities. And think about all of the things that are associated with an elevated mood, right? So for example, you might find that you are more energetic, right? You might find as if that you have a better perception of yourself, you have a higher self-esteem, and also you find yourself more talkative than usual. Maybe if you stay awake for a lot of time, right? So for example, when you're very happy, you might find it very difficult to sleep as well. In fact, there's also a certain case of maybe there are many things that are running in your mind, and you might think that your mind is racing, right? So that is an elevated mood. Now, what mania is basically is that it's an elevation of mood over a period of at least 1 week. Okay, so if you have a period of 1 week in which you have certain symptoms that are mentioned in the DSM-5 criteria and also the ICD-11, you can be diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. Now, in bipolar 1 disorder, there has to be some presentation of manic features, right? So, but there's no need for there to be a diagnosis of depression. So that's the first term, mania. The second term over here is going to be hypomania. So hypomania is a elevation of the mood which is going to affect your general life and the way that you behave, much like how mania did. However, it would be significantly less impairing than mania. Okay, so if there are psychotic features, by virtue of the severity of these features, it's going to be only mania. There is no psychosis in hypomania. Okay, so that's the second term of hypomania. Now, the third term that you have to remember is, and I've talked about this in a previous video, about depression. Okay, so there's mania, there's hypomania, and then there's depression. Depression is a lowering of your psychological faculties and also your psychomotor actions and your thinking and all of this and all of that basically combined. So how do we differ to the two types of bipolar? Because there are two types of bipolar disorders. There's bipolar 1 and then there's bipolar 2. Now they're separated by a key feature of mania. So if you have any evidence of you having a manic episode, right, which is an extreme elevation of the mood, an extreme and prolonged as well. So you are going to be diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder if you have those conditions. On the other hand, if you have a simple, it's not exactly simple because some impairment is still there, but if you have a hypomanic episode and there is evidence that there is a major depressive episode, you can be diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. Now, I'm going to be talking now. The next point that I'm going to bring about is the criteria for a manic or hypomanic episode. So I told you about the general difference between hypomania and mania. Now, let me tell you about some of the features of mania and hypomania. So you have to have at least 3 of them if there is an elevation of the mood. However, you have to have at least 4 of these 7 features if the mood is only irritable. Okay, so now I talked about conceptualizing the manic episode as an increase or elevation in your psychological abilities. Not exactly abilities, but the frequency at which you perform them. So there could be so the 7 features could be something like there's an increase in talkativeness. Okay, there is a decreased need for sleep. There's also a heightened self-esteem or grandiosity. Then there is again about there being major functions of life that you are doing, perhaps to a certain degree that they become pathological for you, right? So, for example, if you are a workaholic in general, you might feel as if that you are going too goal directed towards it, right? So maybe you are not focusing on major things that are important in your life, like your nutrition, right? Or maybe you are taking too much risks at work. So engaging in behaviors which can cause you major issues. So not all of these could be are functional behaviors, right? So for example, you could maybe go to a shopping spree and you might not have the credit to justify that, right? So basically these features, along with a general uncritical self-esteem, or uncritical ways of thinking that maybe you can do anything that you want to. So think about this kind of spanning over a week, and you've got the presentation for mania. Now, in a hypomanic episode, all of these features are the same, right? And one of the features that I forgot to mention was the racing of thoughts or flight of ideas, right? So you might feel as if that at every point in time, you are just able to think about miles ahead of everyone, right? So the way that you talk about certain things can be too speedy for others to understand, right? Or you might feel too much agitated. Then there's obviously, again, as everything is elevated for a long period of time, there is also the case of psychomotor agitation or irritability or distractibility. So basically if we can think about all of these features, and at least if you have at least 3 of them, you can be diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. Now, in the case of hypomania, the same features apply. However, like I said, there is a lesser impairment of your mood and everything. Now, the last point that I'd like to mention here are the risk factors that are associated with bipolar. Now, interestingly, it is seen that many of these, the earlier the onset of the bipolar disorder, the more it has been associated with a poor upbringing, right? Or maybe neglectful upbringing by the parents or the guardians, or very adverse childhood events. So there has to be, there is some linkage between one's manic features and their personality as well. So that is the reason why many of these psychiatric disorders have very, very individual presentations. So you really have to understand the person's life to understand that, okay, if this is a hypomanic episode. Because hypomanic episodes are very easily misdiagnosed as maybe something else, right? Even though, and plus, hypomanic episode is going to be for about 4 days, right? So if you have these symptoms within a 4-day bracket, then you can qualify for hypomania. So understanding these things and understanding the underlying risk factors for it are very important, because they can tell you where the mode of treatment will take you. So I hope that this was an informative video. If you have any questions, or you think that I've left anything out, please tell me in the comment section below. And until next time, take care. Thank you.